Right to you, scallywags, and welcome all of you back, because I could just see that the subscriber count beginning to plummet, dribbling away. So, whilst we're doing today's article, there is actually a little bit of an interesting message I want to send to you guys by the time we're finished with this article. So, I will leave it at the end, and we shall get started. It's just you and me, guys, like two hip wallflowers. So, let's get to work. Also, extreme pro tip: even though it is an open secret, direct references to the Wallflower's identity will be edited out on the quickie in most instances. The consequences that follow from this will vary. For more information, see here. And actually, whilst we are here, we may as well, because I think it seems a bit fair. This article explains the rationale of the Wallflower policy. For more information about the actual gal pal, see the Wallflower. Anyway, in March 2010, Chris announced he had a new lady friend, a Wallflower, at a meeting for young adults, hereby referred to as the Wallflower. In a video he released, he dropped her name, which allowed more malicious-minded trolls to find docs on her and use the quickie page to post her docs, her unique fanfiction, etc., with intents of trolling her. Given the harassment she received and the potential damage, it was reasonable she felt her personal safety was at risk. As such, she requested that the quickie rename her page and remove instances of her personal details. The quickie administrators intend to uphold their promise to the Wallflower, a promise made in good faith. Chris, however, continues to drop both her real name and pen name in numerous videos, blog postings, and pages on the Wikipedia. This makes concealing the Wallflower's identity harder and harder by the day, and to completely protect the Wallflower would require censorship utterly unprecedented on these fair pages. It would severely compromise the Quickie's stated goal of recording and documenting Chris's life. And that's the thing, Chris's life, not anybody else's. Not Cole Smithy, not even Barbara, and especially not the Wallflower. As such, the Quickies policy, if it can be called that, is loosely defined as to adhere to the spirit of the agreement with the Wallflower. That is to say, the Quickie will not make her real name and identity particularly easy to identify, nor will they disseminate Chris's demented idea that the two of them were dating. They most certainly were not, despite what Chris says. Essentially, any media in which Chris mentions her name in passing will be transcribed faithfully but not linked to her article. However, any media that Chris releases that strongly implies or outright states that the two of them were dating, or any media which puts her real identity in significant danger, will not be faithfully transcribed. In this instance, any reference to her will be replaced with the Wallflower, with a note that these changes were performed and what was removed. It is the belief of the Quickie admins that this fulfills their obligation to the Wallflower. With that in mind, the bottom line is that the Quickie cannot protect the Wallflower from Chris. We cannot control who views the YouTube videos where he places her pen name as the title and repeatedly begs her, by full and complete name, to have sex with him because $100 is too much to pay for a hooker. Chris's words, not mine. By and large, the damage has already been done and nothing the Quickie could have done would have prevented it. Nor can we put the genie back in the bottle now that it's out in the world. However, we will adhere to the spirit of the agreement with the Wallflower until such a time as Chris makes the situation untenable or the Wallflower wishes to renegotiate her agreement. Page was last edited 28th of February 2025 at 12:55. But to be honest, what's the actual likelihood of the Wallflower ever wanting to come back to this? Because here's the thing, that was over 15 years ago. Now, granted, yes, it hasn't stopped people in the past, but really, does anybody really think that much? Also, I think people who do try and go out of the way to try and harass the Wallflower, I think they're gonna reap what they sow in more ways than one. And to be honest, I think the Wallflower would, and if she, I think she know what she would do, because if anybody did that to me, that's why I would just call the police or just do something like just to demonstrate to people that I'm not fucking around with stuff like this. I apologize for the cursive language. Okay, now I'm getting pissed off. First off, stop sending this. I don't want to be reminded of it. Second, I told you I'm not your friend anymore. And thirdly, I have a boyfriend now, so back off and leave me alone. The Wallflower ending her relationship with Chris in the most way anybody has ceased communications with Chris. However, no. You know Chris has said her name in at least one video. I think we just don't mention it as she asked nicely and frankly. Having put up being hit on by Chris is enough punishment. Champhron in response to an observer asking about the Wallflower's real name. The Wallflower is the code name of a female friend that Chris met sometime around mid to late January of 2010. Often infamously described as Megan Schroeder's heiress, the Wallflower was one of the few girls Chris has managed to associate with in his post-high school years, who is not, as far as can be seen, a direct result of trolling. In March of 2010, she joined the long list of would-be sweethearts with whom Chris failed to lose his hated virginity. However, similar to her predecessor, the Wallflower only saw her relationship with Chris as them just being friends. Also, like with her predecessors, this wouldn't stop Chris from making frequent advances on the Wallflower or continually declaring her as his girlfriend. After Chris had inadvertently revealed the Wallflower's pen name in one of his Little Big Planet levels on the Quick Image board, they were able to dox her, which led to them leaking portions of her personal life and tons of her rather unique fanfiction, and her getting harassed by said trolls. Eventually, one of the trolls, Surfshack Tito, sent a link to the newly created Quickie page to the Wallflower, which put a significant damper on her relationship with Chris, believing that Chris was the one who set up the page himself, and with Chris only exasperating the problem. Nevertheless, in typical Chris fashion, he has taken it upon himself to blame those goddamn trolls for the destruction of his friendship, making several rage-filled videos and posts where he rants about them, while also not considering that maybe he was part of the problem. Aliases. During her interactions with Chris, the Wallflower went under the pen name Damien Ontaria, her primary online persona, which she used when writing and publishing her fanfictions online. Chris had similarly referred to her as a way to respect her wishes in wanting her information hidden, using the pen name in his Wikipedia article dedicated to her he had written, but only after he wiped the entire thing, as well as in several videos and emails that called out trolls. Despite this, Chris has also used the Wallflower's first name, Heather, a number of times in his videos. By the way, just for those curious, is that we can't know for any for certainty if her first name is Heather. I mean, as far as we're concerned, that might not be true either. I'm personally going with the idea that her name is not Heather because, quite frankly, I don't want to know, because I don't want to guess either way, because I think the important thing is that we don't know, because she's got nothing to do with this. When talking about her publicly, Chris had attempted to keep the Wallflower's identity a secret, only vaguely referring to her as his girlfriend. We all know how this would end up later. Meanwhile, the Wallflower's code name. Now, again, we'll just repeat what we've heard before. And actually, can I? Yeah, okay, that's a little bit better. Okay. Note: the Wallflower policy wasn't set up solely out of respect for the Wallflower or because she inherently deserves it. It was created first and foremost as a personal agreement between her and Quickie admins. Additionally, the policy is primarily enforced solely on the Quickie and its Discord server. It has no obligation to tell other parties how to handle her docs. So anyway, this is Clyde Cash announcing the Wallflower policy in the more 2010 sort of lingo is speaking, as far as trolls would do. Listen up, no personal details ever. I have received a message from Wallflower herself asking for her info to be removed. While I'd rather not remove any information, at the same time the article was focusing on personal details about the Wallflower that weren't at all related to Chris. Since I'd rather avoid any trouble here, I've complied with her request. This new article should be used purely for Chris related information, since she is part of Christory. If Chris uploads information, then you can add it here, but don't add anything you found through internet investigation or whatever. Cogstev herself, the creator of the Wallflower policy, clarifying the policy. Under normal circumstances, the Quickie wouldn't be held accountable for the sharing of the personal information of those who get involved with Chris. This is considering the site is all about an autistic weirdo who overshares constantly and has many aspects of his personal life on full display. The site also already has the information of those who inadvertently wound up in the crosshairs of Chris's life, many of whom wouldn't even begin to fathom how infamous Chris would become in later years. Removing the information of such major players as well, regardless of how much they deserve to get doxxed, also risks putting several significant holes in the narrative if their role with him was crucial to understanding him. For the Wallflower, on the other hand, a very special set of conditions was in place that allowed her censorship. Originally, before Champion deleted the original page, this article focused more on the Wallflower than Chris had intruded into parts of her life that had nothing to do with Chris. Feeling that she was in danger as a result of the troll sending her a link to the page, the Wallflower prompted the former Quickie owner, Cogstev, on the 11th of March 2010 to request that the article be reworked to refer to her under a pseudonym and avoid direct references to her personal life and identity. Clyde Cash announced this on the page's talk page on the same day. It was determined that omitting the Wallflower's identity, which wasn't made public until Chris carelessly revealed her pen name and trolls actively searched for it. In addition, the details surrounding her personal life, not related to Chris, wouldn't majorly affect the perception of Chris's story, and the Quickies administrators agreed to this request. Considering the Wallflower a relatively minor player in Chris's story who had stumbled upon him by happenstance and had no prior knowledge of him. The Wallflower policy has then been implemented onto the Quickie. This involved censoring the Wallflower's real name where it is most prevalent or wherever Chris stated that he was in a relationship with her, as well as discluding information about her that isn't public or otherwise related to Chris. Otherwise, information about the Wallflower that was dropped by Chris, which included her first name as well as images of her, were allowed to be showcased in passing, but wouldn't be linked to this page. The Wallflower's pen name, Damien Ontaria, was also permitted to be used on the Quickie. The codename The Wallflower originated from the fact that Chris had once referred to her as a wallflower due to her apparent I don't even know how to pronounce it. Heistency in a relationship with him in Mailbag 46, where we refer to the friendship as them being two hip wallflowers. The Wallflower policy later served as inspiration for its inbred, and eventually mercy-killing sibling, the Sutrist policy, which took more extreme steps in censoring the gal pal Fiona Cooper, following drama surrounding her getting doxxed by Nort, following her being framed by Bella. Unlike the Wallflower, Fiona was an active member of the Quickosphere, knew a great deal about Chris, actively sought out Chris, didn't ask for censorship, and actively went against all attempts at it when she did an AMA on a Reddit throwaway. Also, like the Wallflower policy, the Sutrist policy threatened to ban users who use Fiona's real identity on pages. Because of the issues this caused, both policies were lessened so that using either of the identities would only result in the edits being reverted, but otherwise no bans would ensue. Prologue. I have read some of your work and I am enjoying your writing style. You have a great imagination and you are very creative. I may have missed it during our last talk, but did you think of for a pen name? So anyway, now that we're sort of all past a lot more of that paper chewing and a lot of things revolving around policies, now we can actually talk about her involvement in the Chris Chan story itself. I apologize that it's taken this long, but I think because this is a very unique situation, yeah, I think we can do that. Based on an email Chris sent to Vivian G, he met the Wallflower on the 22nd of January of 2010 at a young adult social group. Is 27 still considered being a young adult? I don't think. Personally, I don't think it counts as being a young adult because, I mean, here I am reading this at 27, and I feel just like I'm just a man. Really, I feel that's how I can sum myself up. I'm just a man. To which she went at the advice of her mother. On the 25th of January 2010, an email correspondence between the Wallflower and Chris started. Chris, taking note of the Wallflower being a talented author to the likes of him, started to form a bond with her. However, in an email from the 28th of January 2010, not even a week after they met, the Wallflower wrote to Chris that she didn't feel ready for a relationship yet. After less than a week, what is wrong with Chris? As will be shown later, Chris was not deterred by that statement and still thought that he had a serious shot at becoming the Wallflower's boyfriend, despite the fact the Wallflower clearly stated she had no interest. The first public signs of Chris's involvement with the Wallflower showed up in late January of 2010 in Mailbag 46, answered on the 26th of January. Chris claimed to have joined a young adult social group and met a lovely woman there who likes me too. We are hitting it off like two hip wallflowers. Around the same time, in Alec Benson Leary call number 3, which took place on the 30th of January, Chris said he was expecting a phone call that may have been from her. Oh yeah, that was the one where Chris had to try and goose around the idea that he didn't really say sorry for the things he was meant to say sorry to when it came to talking about Alec. The relationship. By the way, just to be honest, and I mentioned to you on Friday, I'm not totally ready to be in a relationship yet. Definitely friends. I'm not the romantic type. I devote my time with work and stories. The Wallflower is saying it in a little bit more of a more clear cut and abrupt. But to be honest, I can see why. She's trying to tell Chris in the nicest possible way, I'm not interested. However, it was getting deep. We hung out at her house in her room. It was comfy. No sex or mouth to mouth. Chris explaining the deepness of his relationship with the Wallflower, despite the fact the Wallflower claims to the Priory, to anything else but a relationship. Meanwhile, in the 14th of February 2010 edition of the Quick Blog, Chris declared that currently my girlfriend and I are getting along great. The relationship is progressing. I only ask for y'all to leave me with my relationship and not make me feel intruded by inquiring constantly. When a correspondent in Mailbag 56 challenged Chris to prove the existence of his new girlfriend, Chris replied, "She does exist, and I do not appreciate your tone at all." The relationship was, at best, just friends. Chris himself has confirmed this in one of his posts on the Solitude forum and again in a private chat with Jackie. In a series of emails to Vivian, it was revealed that Chris had been seeing the Wallflower for a while, treating her as his girlfriend in almost the same manner he had treated Megan. He had taken her out on a date and had plans for a second. He even admitted to attempting to talk her into taking his virginity on or before his birthday, and had planned to pay for a prostitute if she didn't. Either way, someone was going to be losing out in this, in more ways than one. Even with all the evidence to the contrary in his See Ya Later video, he unabashedly refers to her as his girlfriend, despite outright stating earlier that she had refused all of his advances. A series of emails revealed by Surfshark Tito reveals that Chris's attachment to the Wallflower had been a one-sided relationship to Chris, as the Wallflower indeed had no intention whatsoever of being with Chris, and was shocked and appalled at the fact that Chris even thought that she was his sweetheart. The breakup. You son of a bitch! Leave me and Tito alone! I don't want you to ever call my cell or house phone again. I want you out of my fucking life and leave me the hell alone. Or I'm going to have to unfortunately drag my parents into this, and you don't want that. Leave me the fuck alone. I don't want to hear from you ever again, and take my email off your goddamn website. The Wallflower displaying a level of tact quite unforeseen even at this stage in the history of Christian Western Chandler. Chris's response? God dang asexual woman. Chris in his Wikipedia page on the Wallflower a month later. When Chris released a Little Big Planet level that had the Wallflower's pen name in the description, trolls used this as a means to find out her real identity. One of them decided to link her to the quickie. On the 10th of March 2010, Chris released a message to the trolls. Emotionally distraught, he speaks in vague terms about troll interference in his life, and of the plans of a broken heart. At the same time, in a captain's log entry on the Wikipedia, Chris mentioned breakups from being even simply friends with me, which presumably refers to her cutting off all contact with him. In the wee hours of the 11th of March 2010, Chris released a second video, in which he acted out a theoretical meeting between him and an imaginary Clyde Cash. That actually, you know what? Can we watch the video? Would you guys like to see the video that Chris made trying to get one over on Clyde Cash? Can we do that? I hopefully the video's knocking around somewhere. I don't think we've even ever done an article on Clyde Cash, the more I think about it, but where's the, come on, there's gotta be video somewhere. Let's see, Church Audio, Solitude Girls, no. Oh no, it's not here. Oh no. Actually, I've got a better idea. How about I act it out? I think we can do it this one time. I think we can act it out. Okay, Hi. Hello, Christian. Hello. Can I help you? What's the matter? Don't you recognize me? No, should I? Well, it's me, Clyde Cash. Oh. What the hell do you want, you son of a bitch? Oh, I just wanted to tell you what a an idiot-minded, bigoted jerk rat you are. Oh, and how about that time I rapped your sweet Australian panda bear? You son of a bitch! What follows, by the way, is Chris beating himself up, and quite frankly, it's a daring spectacle, to say the least. And ironically, yes, going by that, it's likely that Chris initially blamed the loss of the Wallflower on his old nemesis. However, on the 14th of March 2010, Chris uploaded a new video and shifted the blame to another troll, Surfshack Tito. In between delivering bizarre threats of violence, Chris makes a resolution to regain the love and trust of friendship of his gal pal. It is not clear why Chris believes he can accomplish this goal by donning a kilt, waving around a small knife, putting on a grotesque attempt at a Scottish accent, and generally presenting a hideous affront to the culture and people of an entire nation. See Mel Gibson. It'll make sense. Think about it, guys. An alcoholic racist. Yeah, Chris does kind of fit those descriptions. Maybe Chris is just the female version of Mel Gibson. Maybe we've been trolled. Later the same day, Chris made another video where he again referred to the Wallflower by her pen name and literally begged her to sleep with him because his life was so hard and otherwise he would have to pay $100 for sex with a hooker. You know, the last time I heard of a premise like that, it was literally the first 10 minutes of Finks the Cat. You guys ever seen Finks the Cat? It's all right. It's not Ralph Bakshi's best work, but it was certainly a thing of its time. Um, Moving on. Later the same day, Chris. Okay, hang on. In the Surfshack Tito emails leaked 4 days later, Chris was mocked by Tito, claiming to have had sex with the Wallflower. While Chris was initially incredulous, in a later video he expressed outrage at Tito for taking her from him, as Wallflower had recently begun to back up his claims. I'm not entirely sure why she would do that, but whatever. The third set of emails to the Wallflower finally confirms what had happened. As seen, the Wallflower was outright shocked at the vastness of information on her page within the Quickie, assumed that Chris had set the page up himself, and ended their friendship. Chris, however, kept trying to salvage their relationship long after it became obvious that he didn't have a chance, angering her even more. She also asserted her hatred of Chris by first saying that Tito was indeed her boyfriend before giving up and just telling Chris that she was asexual. Chris's reaction to animization. Chris is convinced that the animization of the Wallflower took place because of his angry threats he made in his video on the 10th of March 2010, roughly around the time when the edits were made, when in fact it had nothing to do with him. The changes to this page led to him believe that he could insist on sweeping edits to many other pages, which he listed in the 14th of March 2010 Captain's Log update on the Wikipedia. Those demands were ignored. The emails from the Wallflower seem to paint a fuller picture to this. It appears that when the Wallflower discovered her page on the Quickie, she got pissed at Chris and demanded that he remove that information. However, he did it through his YouTube videos. Annoyed, she went to the Quickie herself. Chris, in the meantime, continued to drop her first name and pen name in his videos, including one which had it in the title. Chris later also uploaded a list of his former gal pals and sweethearts on the Wikipedia, which included her full name, and Chris goes on to blame the existence of her Facebook page for the leak of her identity and the end of their budding relationship. Continuing with this theme of blame everybody else, on the 19th of April 2010, this would see Chris adding an entire article about her to the Wikipedia. In addition to the usual fits of megalomania and delirium, the page sported a copy-pasted version of this page. Conspicuously absent, however, was this very section. To this day, he believes the entire debacle was the Wallflower's fault, because of why on earth would it be anybody else's fault, eh, Chris? The Wallflower's fault for having a Facebook page for the trolls to discover. Recently, though, Chris has seen fit to partially accept blame for what has happened. I would say it's a little bit late for that, but good on you, Chris. You know, it's like one step forward, one step back, that sort of thing. The aftermath. It seems that, years since after the events of the March warning, Chris has yet to forget her as returning to the internet. He calls out Tito and demands that he apologize to her for breaking up with them, still referring to her as his girlfriend. I generally can't believe he's still doing this. Chris made a reaction video, apparently clarifying that they were indeed just friends. The description of the video seems to suggest that she found out about the video and demanded he correct it. Now, interestingly enough, he hasn't forgotten about her. He hasn't forgiven her for it. Oh, okay, so it's her fault now as well, is it? It's everything in this is everybody else's fault except Chris. I find that interesting. In September of 2012, Chris texted her, in hopes of getting back in touch with her, though it is unknown if she responded or if she had long changed her number by then. This remains the last known communication between the Wallflower and Chris has most likely forgotten about her in the intervening years. While she did her best to wipe out her internet presence, including giving up her fanfiction writing hobby to avoid being further pestered by him or by Weens. Now, again, whether or not she really has given up writing, fan fiction, it's a little hard to say. Maybe she just changed her name and didn't tell anybody. But as far as we're concerned, that might just be the case. Right, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. We left Chris. By the way, notes, pun intended. Think of what most people think the Wallflower policy is. You basically have the Sutras policy. Also, on the 27th of January, Chris wrote to Vivian attending this with a social club. Blah blah blah. Apparently, a nice and pretty 23-year-old woman. Also, apparently, the 27th of January fell on a Wednesday, and the last Friday before that was the 22nd. So probably maybe Chris just miscounted his dates. I should know that because obviously the 31st, my 12th birthday in 2010, it was on a Sunday. I know that because the next year, my 13th birthday was on a Monday. Maybe I should write this article. Maybe I should have been involved in writing, putting this down. Very, very good with dates, I am. Anyway, to date, ladies and gentlemen, let's just sit back and let's think. Well, Squidward, what have we learned today? Yeah, don't go around saying people are your girlfriends, even when they're clearly not. Good. Now go be creepy somewhere else, Chris. Go outside and do it. And with that being said, it is time once again for us all to leave the station. So, all aboard!